everyone. Welcome back to the Dreamcatchers 2022. I'm so excited to be here with my sister, Marissa. Oh, I really like what Marissa wrote as Dream Founder, so I copied that. So thanks for that, Marissa.
Sure.
We are the Dreamcatchers. For those of you who are new to us, we are career and brand experts that grammatically correct, love to speak to others who do really cool things. And we are thrilled to have our friend and guest here today. We're going to have her introduce herself in a second. It's Lauren, by the way, Ming, if you can rename it. Not Laura Tennyson, Lauren Tennyson, who we're going to introduce in a minute or have her introduce herself. So for our first episode back, we thought it would be fun to have a conversation with someone who is an expert in taking care of yourself. Because as mothers, all we do, I can speak on behalf of Marissa and I and all of our mother friends, is think about taking care of others. And so we thought it might be fun to kind of turn the mirror around and say to someone like Dr. Lauren, who I'm going to just affectionately call Dr. Lauren while we're chatting, to say to her, an expert in a women's field, as a woman, as a mother, how we can look to somebody like her in her field or any field for inspiration, for education. And we're just so happy to have you here today, Lauren. Marissa, did you have anything you wanted to add before we have Lauren introduce herself?
I think we have interviewed, close to 60 different guests, and guests could be more than 60 because we've done close to 60 episodes. And I don't know, we've had a doctor, but more of a scientist on the podcast. I don't know if we've ever had an actual doctor on the podcast, although there are many people in the world that follow the Dreamcatchers under the age of 10 that want to be a doctor when they grow up. I think it's interesting when what we do for career is so whimsical, right? And I think will be very fun to collaborate or have a conversation that would normally be whimsical with somebody that probably would not define themselves as whimsical, but doesn't mean that their job was not one of their dream jobs, and or that they're not helping others in the greater good the same way we talk about all the time. So I just wanted to say thank you for spending time with us this way. I'm sure it's not your norm.
It is not.
I'm excited to be able to share that piece of you to our audience.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Lauren, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, tell us who you are, what you do, just a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm so happy to be here as your friend, but also as a physician, surgeon, and an advocate for women's pelvic health and women's health in general. I am Lauren Tennyson. I am a urologist and a urogynecologist. And I hope that I'm excited to kind of speak with you guys and share my story today. And I hope that it inspires really kind of in two ways, just personally, my journey, I guess, and what I've been through the past few years. And then also professionally in terms of what I do on a daily basis, in terms of kind of advocating for women and letting them know. I sound like a broken record during the day, talking to patients saying, you don't have to live like this. This is not normal. You don't have to suffer in silence. So I'm excited to kind of get the word out.
I love it. Well, we are thrilled to have you, and we're going to unpack a lot of your story, some of which I do know, some of which I don't. I just have to say a shout out to the Pollards who introduced me to Lauren, my best friend from Hoboken, my best mommy friend. So very appropriate, being that today's conversation is about being a mom. In fact, our sponsor today is the Monmouth Moms, which we'll talk about in a little while. So my best friend from mommyhood, my first mom friend, Shari Letterman, Pollard Maiden, introduced me to Lauren when she was thinking about moving down to Monmouth County. And through lots of different avenues and ways, we were able to find her a house here through my mom and my friends Beth and Russ Putterman at Focus Real Estate and my mom, Nancy. And then we got her, into the Gone, which is where our kids all go. And we had this love affair from the day we met. And I just was so
don't forget Michigan.
Yes, well, duh. And by the way, I don't necessarily say this in the first sentence, but Marissa always says that I say it at some point during the conversation. Lauren also went to Michigan, go blue. By the way, so did Ming. One of the things that Ming and I have in common, and we say go blue almost every episode in some capacity. And by the way, on the tales of me speaking to the Michigan Alumni Association earlier this week about resumes and dream jobs. What a fun week for me to have now a Michigan grad, another Wolverine here chatting with us today. So our first question is always, the same. And it's because A, we're creatures of habit, but B, we really find that the answer to the first question that we ask on our podcast really dictates a lot of how your journey goes, whether it's, what you're doing now or what you're not doing now, which I find is so interesting. So we always ask the first thing, what did you want to be when you grew up? And by the way, I should say, obviously that answer changes like 1,000 times for every little girl across the world. But what do you remember as your first memory of what you wanted to do when you grew up?
Yeah. So it is entirely random, but really the truth. I wanted to travel the world and be a botanist. I bet you weren't expecting that.
I was not expecting
You
that.
say a botanist?
Yes, I wanted to be a botanist.
Okay.
Whoa. Marissa loves to do this part. Like correlating. Can you correlate wanting to be a botanist to being a pelvic surgeon?
Connect those dots. Connect those dots.
Marissa loves to do this part. She's not gonna be able to do it.
I'm gonna have to bring in a little. I'm gonna have to bring in a lot of Georgia O'Keeffe here.
Georgia O'Keeffe, yes.
Bola, if you're out there, you've been beaten.
Yes, Bola, one of our former guests who's been on our podcast a couple times, has a great answer to this question. And actually, she wanted to be a linguist. A linguist, like study language, which by the way,
remember.
Anyway,
okay.
Botanist. Okay.
You wanted to travel the world and be a botanist.
Yeah. There's really, that is the first memory I have, a recollection of like wanting what I wanted to do as a profession. I went through different phases. At one point, I wanted to be Katie Couric. At one point, I wanted to be a colorectal surgeon. So the doctoring was in there at some point. But yes, my first recollection of what I wanted to be was a traveling botanist in exotic places all over the world.
And why did you want to do that? Like, where did that come from?
I think I liked the idea of kind of like going into like exotic kind of isolated places and having time for self-discovery. I don't know.
Like an eat, pray, love, but like with like hydrangeas. Now, and now that you've settled in New Jersey, how do you feel about the foliage or florals that are available to you here?
It's gorgeous.
Gorgeous here.
We happen to have nice. We have nice things.
Some really beautiful places to hike.
I wouldn't say we have tropical botany.
Right.
But by the way, I love flowers. I don't know if I know much to add to the conversation. I'm curious. Did you work in it? Did you work in like a garden?
Nope. None of the above. And it's not like I continue to have some like special interest outside of medicine to this day. But I had to answer the question truthfully.
Wow. I love that. But the Georgia O'Keeffe thing is actually fairly hilarious.
Yeah. I'm gonna leave it there.
Instead she focuses on a different kind of flower.
I don't need to describe that to people. I think everyone could deduce where I got Georgia O'Keeffe.
Yeah. Correct. Okay. A different kind of flower, if you will. Okay. So that said, after obviously you grew out of that phase or it passed, how did you go from, tell us a little bit about your journey to being a doctor? Because I think as Marissa mentioned, most often we talk to people who are in corporate America somewhere, right? And they like traditional internships and really, had this kind of cookie cutter path. I would love to hear from you, like what made you decide? How did you get there? Obviously, and
most likely have an aptitude for science
or math growing up.
So, I was always a kind of curious kid anatomically. Like I was just always curious about anatomy of animals, anatomy of people. And that, for science projects where you could do anything, you could build a volcano, I I ordered an ostrich eye from like the science book to dissect it for my 8th grade science class. So I just had this kind of like inherent curiosity about anatomy. And that kind of carried through with me to college, Go Blue, where I decided to become a pre-medical student. But interestingly, the sciences, it was kind of, I'm a very goal-oriented person, and I identified in order to become a doctor, you have to do pre-med, and it's a bunch of sciences. But I was an English literature major. I naturally just enjoyed reading and writing, and so I kind of double majored. And getting through the pre-med classes was more of a means to an end of being a doctor. I mean, I enjoy science. Don't get me wrong, but I also enjoy English and other things as well, like the liberal arts. And so I, did pre-med to get into medical school. And then, from the minute I kind of recognized, okay, I want to get into med school, it was head to the grind, just studying. You make sacrifices. So when all of my friends went abroad junior year of college, I did not, because I was studying for the MCAT. And so it was just kind of like, here's my goal. This is what I want to achieve. How can I do it in the quickest and most effective way possible? And so, I got into medical school and I graduated at the top of my class and just really was super focused on doing the absolute best that I could, because I identified, and we'll get into a little bit about that, probably how I chose to become a urologist and choose urology, but it's a competitive field. And so I had to just really always be at the top of my game academically. And so after my residency in urology, I pivoted to focus on female pelvic health, which is an area of urology, but kind of less well known. And here we are.
Man. By the way, not being able to go abroad I think it's interesting that you chose to mention that, but it is something that, we never discussed, and Marissa and I are very, I guess, sensitive to that sentence, right? Because that concept, especially at Michigan, was hard to swallow, I'm sure. That was actually one of the reasons I chose not to be an elementary education major, because I was not able to go abroad, or I didn't want to go into the business school because I wasn't able to go abroad. Like, this was like actual decisions that you're making at 19, 20 years old that are hard decisions. Like, all your friends are going, and that's commendable to like know at that young age to be like, nope, like this is what I have to do in order to do what I want to do and to follow my dream, and I'm going to do it. And you have to sacrifice a lot of things, not just obviously traveling abroad, but a ton of other things.
Did you stay at Michigan for medical school?
No, I went to Albany Medical College.
Okay. So one of the things I think is interesting that I was listening is your interest in English.
Yes.
And your commitment to that. Probably, and this is where I would say, as not knowing you as a doctor, but just knowing doctors or, science personalities in general, probably gives you an excellent bedside manner. Because it does chime into some of the whimsy that you may or may not know that you have, is you're using your creative piece of your brain to engage in, reading, or you relax that way. And that would probably come out in your patient care. And I'm assuming that although you were extremely focused on your studies, if you were to go elbow to elbow against some of your classmates and they did not have that English degree, perhaps they did not have the sensitivity that you possessed when dealing with a client or a patient, I should say. So I think that's kind of interesting. And then also, obviously, sacrifice and just the pursuit of medicine is such an interesting one, right? So it is a call to action to wanting to use your skills in a way that you can help others. That's right. Seriously what it is. I'm sure there's some people that are doctors because they just want to be a doctor, but I can't imagine that sustains when you have to go through all that academia.
Right.
And last but not least, for the layman in the back, you know, you have to go to medical school and then kind of like major or specialize, right? I only get this from like Grey's Anatomy, which I retired watching a decade. But like you have to decide somewhere along the line what your focuses are going to be. Like, and don't you take like don't you shadow different areas?
Residency. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because you have to make a decision in medical school in terms of what career, what field you want to go into, with very little insight and knowledge into the field. I mean, I rotated on the urology service as a medical student for a week. 1 week was my exposure to the field. And so yeah, there's a lot of kind of unknowns there. And as I reflect back on that to this day, and I've since, counseled and helped other medical students making those decisions. And it's just so fascinating to me that with so little knowledge and at such a young age, I mean, 21, 22 years old, you're choosing your forever career.
Yeah. And how after 1 week,
yeah, like how did you
lean in where you're like, oh, that seems cool, so I'm just going to go with that?
And by the way, I should mention, before we came on live, Lauren was saying that she was challenged with our next question, which is right now, what was your aha moment, right? So here you are, a little girl that wants to study plants in Australia, and then you were like, nah, I'll go to Michigan instead and do orgo, like somewhere along the line. Right. You're like, and then all of a sudden,
and I can't go abroad.
And I can't go abroad. So, and I can't even go abroad to look at the plants because of Michigan. So PS to this, here you are in Albany Medical School, I'm from upstate New York. So you're back kind of home-ish and you're thinking about what you want to do. And you're a young, medical student doing rotations. Marissa, that was the word you were looking for, on different areas. What was your aha moment then, as far as urology goes? Like, you're like, all right, this is for me. This is why I want to do this field, because I think I actually can make a difference and help people.
Right. And I mean, I think there can be a little bit of like a nomogram, if you will, or algorithm to making the decision. And they don't formally teach this, or at least they didn't when I was in medical school, but it's like the big kind of picture things. Do you want to do surgery or do you want to do medicine? And you get enough exposure to kind of hopefully be able to decide which is for you. And so I had decided that I wanted to do surgery. And then within surgery, do you want to do a type of surgery where you really don't have relationships with patients? Or do you want to do a field where you have long-term relationships? And I knew I wanted to have long-term relationships with my patients. Mm-hmm. I also knew that I wanted, some fields are classically known for a better quality of life than others. I was like, okay, I'm probably going to want to be a mom at some point. So let's think quality of life as well. And then so urology came along, and I had kind of decided those more fundamental things. And within urology, I recognized that it checked off those boxes. And then there's also a very wide variety of things you can do within the field of urology. And I think I had like the insight to kind of recognize I might not know exactly like what I want yet, but within urology, there's so much variability that I can find something. So because within urology, people might not realize, but you can be an oncologist. You can be just a kidney stone doctor. You can be a male infertility doctor. You can be a female urology doctor. I mean, there's like a lot of different subspecialties off of urology. So that was comforting to me to know that I had to make this decision, but I could find a place within it that I'd be happy. And frankly, when you're a med student, you're very vulnerable. You feel awkward because you're kind of just like there, but you're not necessary. And people get annoyed with you because, they're busy and they just want to do their thing. And the urologists at Albany Med at the time I was there, they were really nice. They were really welcoming and they wanted to teach and they had a sense of humor. And I liked them as people, and that helped because I was so impressionable.
Yeah. And I think a lot of what you're touching on is really like, could be discussed in any industry, right? So here's somebody who I bring this back to our audience, and that doesn't matter your career or your path, but like so much of what you just said, Lauren, was so important to any listener, right? It's like
fascinating, actually.
Finding something that speaks to you, finding something that allows you flexibility, finding something that you like the people above you. I just gave this advice this week to the Michigan grads. It was like, look up, right? Look up around you. Are the people that are like your senior people in that field, in that profession, in your life, do you want to be them? Like, are you interested in what they're doing? And for you to have these mentors at such a young age where you're like, I like them. Like, they're good people. Like, they do good work. They're nice. They're comforting. Like, that's all important in every single industry. And then also to be able to decide at such a young age, like you said, but also to research, which obviously comes as a fundamental skill to you from going to Michigan and being a med student, to like really research and figure out which space you wanted to be in, right? Because it's like, how do you actually decide? Like, there's a million different specialties within urology, even in and of itself. I love that. Okay, so then from there, before we wrap the Facebook live feed, I want to just make sure we get in for the audience. Once you chose urology and you've made this decision to focus on in the, the female area of urology, how did you get, if you will, here, right? So here you are, now you're in New Jersey. You've spent a bunch of years doing all sorts of things all over the place. You've had a crazy ride. So if you could just tell us a brief overview of that ride and how you landed to where you are today on your feet in New Jersey, around the corner from where we are right now. Would love to hear that, because you were in Michigan and you were in upstate New York. And now you're in New Jersey with us, which I find fascinating about how, by the way, relationships matter. And also, being good at what you do and being recognized for being good at what you do brought you to our medical center here in New Jersey, which was not where you're from and not where you thought you'd be.
Right. So a couple of things on that point. And just to go back to the decision to go into urology, because I don't think, like, I was thinking about this, but I think I wanted to trailblaze, and urology is the biggest boys club that there is in medicine. I mean, more so than orthopedic surgery, maybe even more than neurosurgery. Like, 10% of the field is women, and that's getting better. And like in the current trainees, it's certainly more than 10%. But I'm a no drama type person. And I think I liked the idea of entering into a man's world and being able to make my mark in it. And I did not know at the time that I would pivot to female pelvic health. And we can talk about like why I kind of made that decision through training. But so that was that. And in terms of how I ended up in New Jersey, because I did a fellowship in Detroit, Michigan. And, I had not looked up and just smelled the roses in over a decade because of how intense the schooling and training and lifestyle was. And I had lost sight of really like who I was and what I wanted, because I was just on this trajectory. And fast forward to completing residency, which was 6 years, completing a 2-year fellowship, so 8 years. And here we are about to finish fellowship. And I am pregnant with my second kid, and I feel a lump in my breast. And I immediately just knew that it was bad. And it was breast cancer, and an aggressive breast cancer. And all of a sudden, after just over a decade of not looking up, I was forced to pause and step back and not only take care of myself in terms of fighting cancer, but take care of myself in terms of just like, what do I need to be better to myself and care for myself, and what's important in life, and just pause to examine priorities and what really matters. And so that kind of catapulted us back to a certain reality of what's important, like family, because we were going to move to California. We had signed job contracts in Santa Cruz, California. And after we went through cancer, we recognized the importance of family and how much it matters to be close to family. Because when you do go through hardship, there, of course, you have good friends as well, but it's really family that is just shutting their own lives down to be there for you. And so we reevaluated those kinds of things. And New Jersey this area specifically fit the bill for us because it's by the water, and my husband's a surfer and a waterman. And my dad went to Monmouth University and spent a decent amount of time in Monmouth County growing up. And so there were a bunch of things that kind of brought us back here.
I love your story. Okay, so on that note, we're obviously going to unpack way more of that. So if you want to hear more from Lauren, please check us out on all platforms. But in the meantime, just a quick plug for our sponsors today, the Monmouth Moms, who I felt was appropriate to have as our sponsor again. She's been, Kate from Monmouth Moms has been a sponsor of our podcast before, but just thought it would be awesome to talk about them a little bit while Lauren was with us, because she is another Monmouth mom, as we are as well. So we are going to be doing what we call an on-air read of our ad for Monmouth Moms. And I say that because I'm live on Facebook. So I'm going to be looking down, reading something, but I'm supposed to be. So I just want to say that to our Facebook audience. So, but our podcast audience, won't know that part. So now they will. So the Monmouth Moms is part of the Local Moms Network, which is a resource website for busy parents in Monmouth County. I think we can all relate to that, providing instant access to local events, activities, resources, and more. We love our community and are passionate about helping moms find the best Monmouth County schools, pediatricians, local boutiques, and everything in between. So when you move to a new spot like Lauren did, like Marissa and I did, as Monmouth Moms has continued to grow, Kate and her team have really created this hub of information, which I think is just incredible. As a busy mom myself, I use it often. Their mission is to give moms the gift of time by sifting through the information that we just don't have time to sift through, whether it's, introduction to other talented moms, a connection to our, Monmouth County community, et cetera, et cetera. So follow along with them as they highlight and feature some of the best of Monmouth County. They're on the monmouthmoms.com, and you'll also find them obviously on social media. And just a quick recap of the things they cover: summer activities and camps, fitness and wellness resources, local restaurants, boutiques, home improvement, local events and farmers markets, family health care, Lauren, local job board, teen scene, beauties and spas, children's birthday party ideas, which by the way is why I've been on there, because I always try to come up with something creative. Marissa and I are like cursed with trying to have the best, the different, the most different, the most unique birthday parties, and more. So make sure to sign up for their newsletter on their website to gain access to information about the Monmouth Moms, upcoming spring event announcement. Sounds fun. Local activities, updated guides, and more. And by the way, to Kate and her team, they just recently did a huge undertaking over at Bellworks, our second home, which actually is where Ming is right now. Like a big fair, if you will, of just this type of stuff in person. And we know Marissa and I have planned things like this before. We know how big of an undertaking that was. So it sounds like they're going to be doing something like that again in the spring, where you can come out and meet different vendors and people from Monmouth County. So thank you to Kate and her team for supporting the Dreamcatchers. And thank you for being a Dreamcatcher. She's been on the podcast before. And for the rest of our conversation with Lauren, head to anywhere you listen to your podcasts. And thank you to Ming at the Shared Universe for doing our sound and all of this stuff for us today. So anyway, Lauren,